On episode 192, you mentioned the old school wrestling formula. After taxes, whatever remains is split. A third goes to the boys, 2/3 to rent, the promoter, spraying the cat, etc. You have gone over.
It's not spraying the cat, spaying the cat.
Excuse me, I read that wrong. That's
yeah, you think?
Fault. That's completely my fault. Spaying the cat, etc.
Well, your knowledge of feline genitalia has always been questioned.
I'm not Bob Barker, so that tells you right there. You've gone over the 1/3 to the boys before, so I was curious if you could give a much more detailed breakdown of the 2/3. How much did it cost to rent and or staff a building? How much were the aforementioned taxes? If the event was televised, what costs did that add? You alluded to Jerry Jarrett probably making at least double what Lawler made at 10%. Is that just speculation? Most importantly, how much did it cost to spay the cat?
Jeez. Okay, you asked about 18 questions there. As far as if the event was televised, did it add costs? Well, yes, obviously, because then you had to rent a TV truck and a crew. But now he might also be saying in some cases, like, for example, in that fucking crooked New York City, one of the reasons why that Ring of Honor left the Hammerstein Ballroom for a period of time in New York was that they actually have a site origination fee. You pay the normal rent, you pay the normal expenses for the building, everything is the same as a normal show, but if you plan to televise from that location, they charge you like an extra $10,000. To do nothing different except you're paying to bring fucking technical equipment in and et cetera and shoot the show and send it. And of course, when it was the beloved Kerry Silkin, Sid had got them to waive that, and they weren't paying that for the internet pay-per-views. But when they found out Sinclair Broadcasting bought the company, they doubled the rent, and they threw that back in. And I think at one point they wanted to charge $3,000 to hold a parking space out back for the TV truck. And I think that's the building. It doesn't. The Moonies or some kind of religious fucking fanatics own the building anyway, and they're goddamn nuts, but they were also pricks. And then they rented our final battle date out from under us 1 year, and we had to go 2 days before Christmas and all that other shit. But I digress. If you were going to shoot it for TV and you had to bring in production, yes, that would add cost to it. There are different expenses associated with running any kind of wrestling event. But let's just say, I just did an article for Fighting Spirit magazine, my column there once a month, on some of my August events, because it's the anniversary in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. The Knoxville Civic Coliseum was at the time second biggest arena in town, next to Thompson Bowling. It seated 6,000 people. In the modern era, about 5,000 for the wrestling setup that we were using. But you've been there. It's a real sports arena. It was the big one in town until they built the college arena. Everybody in the state knows where it is. They have ticket windows that you have staff with ticket takers and ticket sellers. We had to have 8 or 10 cops as security, and they had building ushers to help people get to their seats and control things. Because, if you're going to draw 3,000 or 4,000 people, you have to have a staff in a building like that, because they won't let you just come in like the promoters do now when they rent the rec centers and say, well, my ring crew will be security. Or, we don't need an EMT because, Jeb over there has a fucking first aid kit. We'd have to pay a EMT technician to stand by in Knoxville at the Coliseum because there was a city ordinance. But, things like that. But the beauty of it was, especially in those days, all those buildings had great relations with wrestling promoters because they'd made them so much money over the years, because the people, they drew such big crowds on weekly and monthly basis. So Sandy Scott went in with the manager in Knoxville. And for our first event, he got a flat fee versus a percentage. In other words, X $1,000 versus X percent of the gate, right? But our flat fee was so good because we rented 12 times a year and they wanted wrestling to be back. It was a flat fee of $800 or $1,000.
That's great.
So when we ran the Knoxville Civic Coliseum, the first time we ran it and did about 900 people or whatever the fuck. The whole thing, including the ticket takers, the staff, the whole 9 yards, cost us $2,600. You can't do that these days because these buildings don't want wrestling because it's been 20 years since it made them any money. And they don't give a fuck, and all the costs have gone up. In Freedom Hall in Johnson City was the same thing, brand new, bright, gleaming arena with all the staffing and the security and the various blah, 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 and a guy to run the spotlight for $3,000. But in other cases, we actually made more money. For example, in Pikeville, Kentucky, that's a perfect example of a spot show. And a spot show is where a lot of the costs are borne by the local sponsoring group, and suddenly they don't become costs. If we wanted to go to Pikeville and rent a college gym from the college, they'd say, oh, well, give us $1,000 or whatever. But if the college football team booster club is running the event to raise money for the football team's fucking new uniforms, all of a sudden that rent becomes zero. They just say, yeah, you guys, you can have the college gym. And they put out the posters, and they do the local publicity, and they get the local radio station involved or whatever. And the wrestling promotion just provides the matches, the ring, and the promotion on its television show. So if you hit like a bluegrass brawl type of deal, which was great for us, where we would do $12,000 at the gate, we would, the sponsor group would have run the concession stand and got the food and drink concessions, and they would get 25% of the gate, and we would have nothing in it otherwise than fucking talent. And of course, we always brought the cameras up and shot it because it was a big show. But, those type of deals and those old summer football field spot shows in Tennessee and Kentucky for years that would draw 1,500, 2,000 people in the summertime out there to the big wrestling show in Selmer, Tennessee or whatever. I remember one time we ran Corinth, Mississippi and drew 2,500 people just because it's the first time they'd seen live wrestling at the new college gym. So those were even more profitable. Plus, to be honest, when you're a promoter making money, there was many times in the Memphis territory in the 70s and 80s when Eddie Marlin would have been driving back to Nashville from Olive Branch, Mississippi, or one of these goddamn spot shows that they ran that clicked because they had a good local sponsor and they drew 2,000 people with 12 or 15 grand in cash in a suitcase in the trunk of his car. And there was no better person to have that suitcase and deliver it than Eddie Marlin. Let me just say this. That money was fucking safe. However, I'm not saying all that money got to the bank Monday morning because some of it might have fell out when they ran it through the separator at the office. And that was just one show out of when they ran big arenas, they'd settle with a check, but you could draw cash, but you had statements and you had athletic commission reports, et cetera, et cetera. Memphis Mid-South Coliseum, Rupp Arena in Lexington, but in places, even Nashville at the fairgrounds, that was a turnkey operation. They ran the ticket window, Ms. Jarrett, for 50 years, sold the tickets. So let's just say, even in a mid-sized or small territory, there was $50,000 in cash probably a lot of times coming through the windows of just these small shows. And all of it might not have made it to the government reporting.
Well, that answers certainly his question. How much were the aforementioned taxes?
That's what license to print money. You were literally, it was these fucking the Carolinas, I'm sure was the same way. I know Tennessee was. And thing when Nick Goulas and Roy Welch had the entire Nashville booking office of the early 70s, when they were so big, they not only had two separate territories in Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, but they also provided talent to the East End and in the Knoxville and Tri-Cities areas. And they were booking 50 wrestlers and running 3 shows a night. And Birmingham was doing 5,000 people a week or whatever the fuck. Same night as Memphis was doing 7 or 8 on Monday nights, just alone. But all the spot shows they ran in the National Guard armories and the American Legion halls and these colleges or high school gyms in these little towns where the people would come, the $3-4 tickets, and they're drawing, $10,000 plus gates. Literally, Nick Goulas, the story was, built a new office building in Nashville right before he ended up 2 years later, I think, closing up, and it was like $200,000 he paid for it in cash that he had sitting in a safe at the office. So who's the fucking marks now? That was it was impossible almost to lose money as a wrestling promoter until all of a sudden wrestling evolved and everybody made it big.
Well, to stay on this topic, of course, Minnesota Mark also wanted to know, you alluded to Jerry Jarrett probably making double, at least, than what Lawler made. Is that just speculation?
Well, no, it wouldn't be speculation in terms of, think about it this way. Jerry Jarrett was part owner of the promotion at that point. He had given, and I'm not trying to do Jerry's tax returns in public because he gave me this information when we wrote the Tuesday Night at the Gardens book. When he opened up Louisville, Evansville, Lexington, the northern towns here, he considered it his business because he was opening up those new towns, and that's what Nick Goulas had told him that he could do. And he gave his mother, Christine, 25% to be the nominal, face of the promotion because he was still a wrestler and take care of the business and the books, and et cetera. And then once it got started drawing, Nick took 50% because he said it was an office town. And that's before Jarrett had split off. So all of a sudden, Jerry had 25% of his own business, right? But once that and then he had to cut Bruiser and Snyder in 5% for running their towns that they hadn't run in 5 years. So once that he split off from Nick Goulas, he had a partnership with Buddy Fuller because Buddy Fuller had taken Roy Welch's interests. But that I do not believe was 50-50 partnership. And nevertheless, by 1979, which is the point that we were talking about, Jerry had his own company that was running Memphis also. His mother had 25% of Louisville Wrestling Enterprises, which made him money, but he also had his separate company that was running Memphis, kind of oversaw the whole thing. So before Jerry Lawler was a partner in the promotion and was just the top star wrestler, even though he had 10% of Memphis, so if Memphis drew 20 grand, he got two grand out of it. Jerry had the majority interest in the whole promotional company. And they were running 6 towns a night 6 towns a week, every week, 52 weeks a year. And I'm pretty confident in what I know about Jerry Jarrett, that if he promoted a wrestling event, the highest paid wrestler on that event would not have made a bigger profit on that event than Jerry Jarrett, or he would not have run it. Is that plain as I can put it? So, once again, yes, and there were a lot of costs and there were expenses. And if you hit a bad period, now the same Jerry Jarrett in 1990 and 91, when things had gone significantly downhill in the wrestling business, told me one time when he was bringing me and the Fabulous Ones in on a guarantee, and that Gulf War thing happened and preempted all the TVs of our big angle with Lawler. Anyway, he said last year I had $250,000 in an account that I reserved for wrestling, and it's now down to $150,000. And I don't intend for it to go much further, which is when he cut out our guarantees.
Yeah.
But that was a case where, yes, over a period of time, it could cost you money to promote wrestling in bad periods like that, but there had never really been bad periods like that, like 90 or 91 in the territory business, before. So, it was not a common thing for any local wrestling promoter to lose a lot of money, much less 6 figures.